Hello and welcome to Stand Up for Jehovah. Today I'm going to be revealing all the comedy highlights from the leaked document Correspondence Guidelines, which is about a 118-page document that the Watchtower Society and Watchtower Bible and Tract Society have provided for when people write in to the branch to asking questions. And this document tells them how to answer those questions. So really, I'm saving you a whole heap of time. You don't ever need to write to them again because all the answers are in here. The beginning of the document has a little preamble where it tells the people who are answering the letters, as you answer these letters, keep in mind that you are replying to a person. No, you mean an actual human being has written this letter to me? Yes, indeed. It says, your response should not be merely factual. You should reflect interest in the person and the matter posed. Wait. You mean when I write back, I should pretend that I'm interested in the person writing and in the question that they've asked? Wow, how bizarre. I just think, do they, I'm speechless. Do they need to be told that? If someone writes you a letter, do you need to be reminded that a human being has written you the letter and that you should reply showing an interest in the points they've raised? Blimey. Then comes the shocking news that if you're a woman, you're not allowed to write in at all. It says, in many cases, the question raised is one that should be taken up with someone else. For instance, a wife ought to consult her husband. So ladies, don't bother. If you don't have a dinkle, they're not going to reply to you. And then if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, don't expect to reply at all. It says when a non-witness presents challenging questions, it's best to send only a brief reply. In some cases, it may be best not to reply at all, without first having the elders visit him to determine his sincerity and motive. So, if you're not asking a question when really wanting the answer, you're not going to get a reply. Well, we already knew that, didn't we? We've tried so many times to get straight answers from Bethel and the branch office and by phone call and letter. We know they just don't like giving answers at all. There were some new sins in this document, which I was really pleased to discover. Did you know it's not proper to use leeches in medical treatment? And did you know it's not proper for a Christian to administer a blood transfusion to an animal owned by him or to authorise another to do so? Oh, wow, you could have been disfellowshipped without even realising those sins existed. Some things are only sins if people in the world find out about them. So drunkenness, it says in cases where reproach has been brought upon the congregation by public drunkenness, judicial action may be required. But on the other hand, if a brother has overindulged to the point of being drunk in private, one elder might be able to handle the matter by giving good counsel. So if you bring reproach upon Jehovah's name, then you're in trouble. Another reproach sin is this, illegal therapies. Illegal therapy, we're talking about something that is not legal by the law of the land that you live in. As with other illegal activities, urge the individual to be law-abiding. However, remember that it's not the congregation's responsibility to be an arm of the law. If they're engaging in illegal activities, it's not our problem. We're not an arm of the law. No, we don't have to be an arm of the law to report something to the law that's illegal. That's not acting as an arm of the law. That's just being a good citizen. They're surprisingly lenient in other things as well. Illegal activities, it says, if an elder learns of an illegal activity or serious crime, I think serious crimes to me, assault, armed robbery, murder. If the elders learn of a serious crime on a part of one of the congregation members, they may not be obliged by law to report the offender or offence to secular authorities. It's none of our business, don't worry about it. So to summarise, you can assault someone or commit a serious crime or maybe murder someone, and that's okay. But if you use leeches, you'll have your special privileges revoked. Oh dear. If you do something that they don't like, but you can't be disfellowshipped for it, there's an in-betweeny punishment, which is losing special privileges, which I just mentioned. So, for instance, here's an example. If you get sterilised as a form of birth control only, you don't qualify for special privileges. So, if you've had 9 kids and then you get sterilised and you've only done it to stop having kids, you could lose your special privileges. The fact that you've got 9 kids and you haven't got time for any special privileges is by the by. So if you get sterilised, obviously you're going to go to the elders and tell them, aren't you? They've then got to interrogate you to ascertain the purpose of the sterilisation. And if the purpose is incorrect, you can have the in-betweeny punishment. However, the worst punishment of all is not disfellowshipping. I know you thought it was, but it's not. The worst punishment of all is this. If you've been disfellowshipped, you are not to receive copies of our kingdom ministry. No! No! So, losing all contact with your family, your mum, your dad, your siblings, your aunties, your uncles, being cut off, losing your job because you were employed by a Jehovah's Witness, being driven to the edge of depression and despair, that's nothing compared to not being allowed a kingdom ministry. Oh my God! What are their priorities here? Do they honestly think that's any kind of punishment at all? Oh boy. Misogynism, as you would expect, is rife in this document. And here's the bit where I go all serious and feminist on you. But I really, really am angry about these passages. So here's the first example. When letters about domestic difficulties are received, no matter how strongly they may stir your sympathies towards the inquiry, remember that you have usually heard only one side of the matter. Now, straight away, I know that by domestic difficulties, it means domestic violence. And secondly, I know that they're talking about women who write in with these heart-wrenching letters about being battered by their husbands. But how they reply makes it sound like, oh, it could be a man, it could be a woman that's writing. But I'll explain to you why we know it's women in the end of this passage. It says, when giving scriptural counsel in reply, even if the inquirer seems to be in the right, encourage him or her, it could be anyone, could be a man, could be a woman, him or her to determine whether there is anything that he or she has done to aggravate the situation. Has he or she asked for it, basically? Here's where we know it's not talking about he or she. Next sentence. In many cases, the husband may be an unbeliever, but we'll be reading the reply. If respect for headship is encouraged, this may impress him and help him to improve the situation. What the actual fuck? If you're being battered by your husband and you write in a desperate letter asking for help, they're going to write back and say to you, were you asking for it? And stick with it, respect headship. All that because he might accidentally read the letter and he'll be so impressed at this wonderful organisation that hides and supports wife batterers that they'll go, oh, I'll stop beating my wife now. She wrote for help and they encouraged her to be submissive to me. Grow up. Next passage that indicates deep misogynism. It's quite funny, this one. When inquiries are specifically made as to the propriety of oral or anal sex within marriage, reference can be made to the article on a godly marriage. These perverted sexual practices within marriage are scripturally explained as to be a form of uncleanness. Now, let me explain this situation. My wild guess is this, and there's a clue in their reply later on that makes me think I'm right. My wild guess is this. You're born in Jehovah's Witness and you're a girl and you're very, very sheltered sexually and you're not allowed to hold hands or do any of that, and then you grow up and you marry someone in the truth and suddenly, you're expected to do dirty things that you've never come across before. Having only held hands for the first 20 years of your life, your husband suddenly wants you to do a bit of oral sex or even the other up the back door. And you are traumatised. Utterly traumatised. You might not get this, gentleman, but if you've been brought up very, very sheltered, something like that, suddenly not being able to do it the day before you get married, being expected to do it the day after you get married is deeply traumatising. My guess is that lots of women write into the society in deep shock, wondering if this is okay or not. And here's the clue that makes me think I'm right. Well, first of all, it says, this is not a matter that the elders should feel that they need to inquire into or try to regulate. Bollocks, because they do regulate it. And then it says, if husband and wife differ on this matter, which is often the basis of a letter of inquiry. Now, try to imagine the situation of a loyal brother writing in, traumatised to the society, saying, my wife wants to perform oral sex and I'm traumatised. Please tell me what to do. It ain't going to happen. The one who objects to a practice, the wife, could attempt to reason with his or her mate, yeah right, asking respect for his or her conscience. But the really disingenuous part of that is that it says this is not a matter that the elders feel they should regulate. But then in the line above they say these perverted sexual practices within marriage. So I'm sorry, gents. Your wife was right to write in. However, she's not allowed to write in. She has to ask you, husband, can I write to Bethel to ask if oral sex is wrong because I really don't want to give it up? And he goes, no, you can't. And here's the other thing that the husband's going to say no, you can't to as well. Care for aged parents. This is a scriptural responsibility. Yes, it is. We all know that. We're all told you should look after your aged parents. However, as for care provided by a married daughter, and let's face it, most care of children and old people is provided by mums, isn't it? Married daughters who go back and look after the parents for years until they die. As for care provided by a married daughter, final decisions rest with her husband. What? So you can't even look after your own mum and dad, which is a scriptural responsibility, unless your husband says yes. So, when did your husband ever get on with your mum? When did that ever happen? Mother-in-law jokes aren't there for no reason, are they? I just find that disgusting, that they've given the man the authority to tell his wife that she can't look after her own parents. On the bright side, under disfellowshipping, it does say being raped is not porneia. Yay! Here's a couple of other surprising things that come out of the document. Blood guilt. Did you know that elders can decide whether you're blood guilty from a crime, irrespective of whether you go through the legal justice system and what the legal justice system decides? Completely, they're their own system. I mean, why would you go to the law when you can have two plumbers and a window cleaner deciding on your blood guilt? So there's quite a long passage where it says, if a witness is liable for someone's death in an accident, the elders should investigate and appoint a judicial committee to hear the matter. Perhaps the individual will also be investigated by the government or face court action, but the government's view of the case does not altogether determine the congregation's conclusion. The court may declare him guilty, but the congregation may determine that no blood guilt rests on him. Or the court may dismiss the case for some reason, but the congregation may conclude that blood guilt definitely exists. So if you're driving around without due care and attention and ramp up a pavement and kill some kiddies, the elders decide. The plumbers and the window cleaners decide, not the court. And what's the punishment if they decide you're blood guilty? The punishment is, where blood guilt has been determined by the committee, restrictions will be imposed. Not the kingdom ministry. No! It says about taking brothers to court. Paul's counsel to the Corinthians don't apply to every instance of taking a brother to court. So, if you've been raped as a kiddie, then Paul's counsel applies. You mustn't take a brother to court. But it does say that if you've had a car accident or you need to get to the insurance, that's okay. Paul says that's okay. Paul wrote it in the Corinthians, car accidents and things. That's fine. Raping and murder, blood guilt, that's Don't go to court for that. It's just not right. You can be a dirty skanker as long as it doesn't bring reproach on Jehovah's name. Every effort should be made to help the offender see the need to keep his body and place of residence physically clean. But being disfellowshipped would only be considered if the uncleanness is offensive and brings much reproach on Jehovah's good name. So if you're just living like a recluse, or rocking up to Kingdom Heart like a dirty, stinky, pissy cat lady, that's okay. But if somebody on the outside is offended by it and it brings reproach on Jehovah's name, disfellowship, no kingdom ministry. Finally, you didn't expect me to get through the whole video without mentioning oral and anal sex again, did you? Their preoccupation is my preoccupation. Sexual conduct. It's good to indicate that it is not for the Christian congregation to direct individuals about what may or may not be done in the marriage bed. Yay, we can do oral sex. However, show proper restraint even during sexual relations, not resorting to unclean acts. Christians should always have a hatred for all perverted practices, oral or anal sex. But I thought you just said that you can't say what can be done in the marriage bed. Now you can say what can be done in the marriage bed. I don't get it. I think I'm going to have to phone up Bethel and ask them for some guidance on the correspondence guidelines, because that bit really doesn't make much sense to me. I hope you've enjoyed my little comedy romp through the correspondence guidelines. If you're a woman and you can't phone Bethel or write to Bethel because you're not allowed to, please feel free to write to me and I shall write back to you using the guidelines from the Watchtower Society. Thank you for listening to Stand Up for Jehovah.